Dr. Ranjani Parthasarathy is a professor in the Department of Information Science and Technology, Anna University. Her area of specialization is computer architecture and networks. One of her special interests is Indian language technology systems. She is actively involved in research in all the areas and has over 50 publications to her credit. She has about 25 years of experience covering both industry and academics.
Welcome to the UGC lecture series in computer science. This is a series of lectures on computer networks. We have been looking at various layers, and now today we will be looking at the application layer. In the application layer, we will be looking at a specific protocol which is used for email, for the electronic mail. The protocol that is used for email is Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. So, we will take a look at details of this protocol. There are also associated protocols called MIME standard and the POP3 and IMAP protocols. We will take a look at that in some other later session. So, coming to our electronic mail, if you look at the protocol, if you look at what constitutes electronic mail, there are three major components that we normally talk about. One is user agent, second is the mail server, third is the simple mail transfer protocol, which is used for communication between the user agent and the mail server. So, these are three different components that we say which are involved in electronic mail. Now, if you look at the representation of this pictorially, you can see what is happening here. We have mail servers. There are multiple user agents which are connected to mail servers. So, similarly, I have another mail server here and different user agents may be connected to this, another mail server here, different user agents connected to this. The different mail servers talk to each other using the SMTP protocol. The user agents may talk to the mail server again using SMTP protocol or other access protocols as the case may be. So, basically we can see that we have three different components: the user agents which use the mail, which kind of access the mail server using either the SMTP protocol or other access protocols. The mail servers talk to each other using the SMTP protocol, and it is through the SMTP protocol that the mail from one user is transferred to another user who is connected to another mail server. So, this could be your yahoo.com for instance, this could be your google.com for instance, and so you at yahoo.com may be talking to I at google.com. So, and this kind of connection takes place using the SMTP protocol. So, if you look at the three components, the user agent, the mail server and the SMTP protocol, we need to understand some of the details of what actually happens in each of these components. So, if you look at the user agent, which is this user agent is also referred to typically as the mail reader. This is responsible for composing, editing and reading mail messages. Now, this is an activity that we are all very familiar with. It does not need any elaboration as such. You compose messages, we edit messages and we read mail messages. So, all this happens through the use of an application called the user agent or the mail reader. Example of such applications that we use are Fedora, Outlook, Netscape Messenger and so on. Typically what happens is the outgoing and incoming messages are stored on the server. So, the mail reader or the user agent just is used for accessing these messages and for composing and editing the messages that we need to send. Okay. Now, if you look at the mail servers, what is it that the mail server does? So, what are the components that are there in the mail server? So, you will see that the mail server has a mailbox which contains the incoming messages for the server and a message queue of outgoing mail messages that is to be sent to other mail servers. Okay. Then of course, it will also have the SMTP protocol residing on it, because this has to be used for data transfer between the mail servers. So, the SMTP protocol is used for between mail servers to send email messages. So, when we talk of an SMTP protocol, we talk about two aspects. One is the client side of the protocol and the other is the server side of the protocol. The client side of the protocol is the one which is responsible for sending the mail, and the server side is responsible for receiving the mail server, receiving the mail. So, when we talk of a mail server which is both sending and receiving mail messages, you will actually see that it has both a client part of it which will be responsible for sending mail and a server part of it which is responsible for receiving mail. So, to summarize what happens in the mail server, we can see that it has a mailbox, a message queue and the SMTP protocol that is used. So, if you look at this picture here, we can see that in each of the mail servers we have shown two different boxes sitting inside. The green color box refers to the outgoing message queue. So, all the messages from the various user agents are queued into this message queue, and from here they are transferred via the SMTP protocol to other mail servers. The small yellow boxes here refer to the user's mailbox. So depending on how many users you have, you will have different user mailboxes, and so the incoming mail is typically placed in these user mailboxes, and the user agent will, when he contacts the mail server, he picks up the mail which is resident in his user mailbox. So this is typically how it is handled. You can see that it is very similar to what normally happens in any mail, even in a surface mail system. So you will have an inbox where you will receive messages, and you have an outbox where you will be sending messages. So it's a typical similar kind of system that is emulated for electronic mail as well. So we looked at these two now. We looked at what a user agent is supposed to do and what a mail server is supposed to do. So the third thing now we need to look at is the SMTP protocol. Okay. So coming to the SMTP protocol, the simple mail transfer protocol as it is called, it is one of the oldest protocols, network protocols that have been in use. In fact, it was one of the first protocols that was tried out for data transfer between two different machines, and this was standardized on RFC 2821. In fact, there are earlier standards also, but RF 2821 is one of the latest standards for SMTP. Now this is responsible for direct transfer of the mail messages, that is for sending server, and from the sending server to the receiving server, the direct transfer of messages takes place using this SMTP protocol. We say it's a simple mail transfer protocol, and we also find that the protocol itself is very simple. It's a very simple protocol, and that is one of the reasons for the success of this protocol as well. Now if you look at how the data transfer actually takes place using the SMTP protocol, you will find that there are three phases of data transfer. So the three phases go like this. First, you have a handshaking phase or a greeting phase. So something like hello that we normally do before we do any data transfer or any communication for that matter. Second is the transfer of messages. Once the greeting has taken place, once the handshaking is done, then we transfer messages. Third, you have a closure phase where you indicate to the other server that you are finished with your communication, so you can close the data transfer mechanism. And the electronic mail, the SMTP protocol, uses TCP as the transport layer protocol. So since it uses a TCP, it's able to provide a reliable service. Now we remember the TCP is used to provide reliable transport service, and electronic mail uses TCP to reliably transfer email message from the client to the server. The port number that is used is 25. So that's a standard TCP port that is used, and data is transferred reliably from the client to the server. Remember that we need reliable data transfer here. We cannot afford to have losses, so we use the TCP protocol. Okay. So if you look at further details of this SMTP protocol, if you look at how it is organized, it's basically organized as a command and response interaction. That is, you find that commands will be given from the client to the server, and the server responds to it. Okay. All the commands and response, everything happens as ASCII text. So the command will be a typical ASCII text, and the response will be again in ASCII. It will have some kind of a status code and a phrase. Status code will be some number which tells you what is the status, and then that will be followed with a phrase which kind of explains what that status is. All the messages are in 7-bit ASCII. You can see that that's another reason why it's a simple transfer protocol. So it just transfers 7-bit ASCII messages. So it's all plain text, and it can be just read. So all your SMTP protocol related information, if you just print it out, you can read all of them as plain text. So and that gives us a very clear understanding of what actually happens in the mail transfer protocol. So let's now look at a typical scenario as to how data is transferred from some sender to a receiver. So let's say we have a sender Alice who wants to send message to Bob, who is the receiver. So this is typically a communication that would take place. So you can see what happens here. The first thing that will happen is, let me just tell you the boxes that we have here. You have the user agent, which is used by Alice to talk to her mail server, and this mail server will transfer data to another mail server here, and from this mail server it will be transferred to the user agent. Okay, this user agent is the one that Bob is connected to, so he gets his messages through this. So as a first step, what would happen is Alice would use the user agent to compose a message and send it to bob@someschool.edu. So let's say this is the mail address, and so this is what Alice will do using the user agent here. This is the first step. The second step would be that now the user agent takes the responsibility of placing this message in the mail server corresponding to this user agent. So Alice user agent sends the message to her mail server, and what will happen now is that the message will be placed in the message queue in the mail server. Now this is the second step. Third step, now that it is there in the mail server, it's now the mail server's responsibility to send it to the other side's mail server, right. So the client side of SMTP now opens a TCP connection with Bob's mail server. So this is to indicate that you have opened up a connection, now you can start sending your SMTP messages using this. This is the third phase. The fourth step would be that SMTP client now will send Alice message over the TCP connection to the SMTP server which is residing on this mail server. Okay, so this is the fourth step. Next step, now the message that has been sent would have arrived at the mail server. So Bob's mail server places the message in Bob's mailbox. So it places it into the mailbox corresponding to this particular user. So that's the fifth step. Sixth step is when Bob, who is the user, he invokes his user agent to read the message. So you will use the user agent to get the message from the mail server and read it. So you can see that these 6 steps typically give us a full idea of how the message is transferred from a user, from a sender to a receiver. Okay. So this again is just a quick summary of what we just talked about. So you can see that Alice uses the user agent to compose message and sends it to Bob at someschool.edu. Alice user agent sends the message to her mail server and the message is placed in the message queue. The client side of SMTP opens a TCP connection with Bob's mail server, and fourth, SMTP client sends Alice message over the TCP connection. The fifth step is that Bob's mail server places the message in Bob's mailbox, and sixth, Bob invokes his user agent to read the message. So this completes the entire the mail transfer using the SMTP protocol and with the help of the user agent and the mail server. We will just take a look at a sample SMTP interaction in terms of the actual protocol messages that would be sent. So this is the interaction that we are talking about between the client and the server. Okay. So if you look at what typically happens, the server, for instance, let's say we start with something like this. Server gives a status message which says 220, typically it indicates OK, and identifies itself as who that particular server is, hamburger.edu, let's say that's the name of that server. So now the client sends a hello message. So remember we talked about 3 phases. First is the handshaking phase, right. The handshaking phase is where we say hello, hello, right. So this is what is happening over here. So the first step is that you have the client giving a hello and introduces himself saying that I am so and so, right, creeps.fr. The server responds by giving a 250 status code which indicates OK, accept your hello, and there is a further expansion of that which says hello so and so, I am pleased to meet you. Now client then indicates a message which says it's a command which says I am sending mail, and the from who is the person who is sending it. It says Alice at creeps.fr is the person who is sending this message. Now the server responds by saying that 250 Alice at creeps.fr, at sender is OK. So it accepts the sender. Then the client says receipt to and indicates the person to whom the mail has to be sent. So it says Bob at hamburger.edu. So now the server says 250 Bob at hamburger.edu, recipient is OK, that is, which means the recipient exists and it's willing to receive the message for this particular user. So now C follows it up with the actual data that needs to be sent. So it has a data phrase which it sends, which is followed by the actual data, right. So the moment the client says that data is to be sent, server accepts that yes, it's willing to receive the data by sending a message, a number called 354, and says enter mail, end with a dot on a line by itself. So it indicates that a dot on a line by itself will be used to end the message. So you could have whatever message you are sending. So for instance, client may say something like, do you like ketchup, how about pickles, whatever, and to indicate that it's come to the end of the message, it puts a single dot on a line by itself. Just a single dot on a line indicates the end of the message. The moment this dot is received on a single line, server knows it is the end of the message, and so it now sends back a response which says 250 message accepted for delivery. Once the client is done with this message, then he gives a quit command. So C:quit, the client says quit, and in response to the quit, again the server accepts the quit and gives a 221 message which indicates that it is okayed the quit message and it is going to close the connection. So it says hamburger.edu closing connection. So you can see the typical set of messages that are being exchanged between the client and the server. So you can see that some of these are actually commands and responses that are received in response to those commands. We will take a short break now, come back and continue the details of these commands. Welcome back after the break. We have just been looking at the SMTP protocol. We just saw the typical set of messages which are exchanged between the SMTP client and the SMTP server. So, now we will take a further look at the different commands that are actually there in SMTP and how these commands, what these commands mean and how information is conveyed using these commands. So, let us take a look at the commands that we have. So, actually some of these we are already familiar with. In the example that we just saw, we used all these commands. Hello is a command which is used for handshaking phase, in the handshaking phase. So, you say hello and you specify who you are. So, my domain name, who am I, who is giving a hello. So, I have to always introduce myself. So, you say hello followed by your domain name. So, this identifies the sending mail transfer agent. So, typically we refer to these SMTP clients as mail transfer agents because they are responsible for transferring data from the sender side mail server to the receiver side mail server. So, we say hello is a command which is used by the client to identify itself. Hello, my domain name, and this identifies the sending MTA. Mail from is another command. Now, mail from typically is followed by who the person who is sending the mail is. So, you typically have sender at host name. This is the format of the mail from command. Similarly, we also saw another command called receipt to. This is to say that who is the recipient. So, recipient is specified, there is a to person, right. So, you say receiver at other dot host, whatever is the address over there. Data is a command, is a keyword which indicates the start which indicates that you are starting transfer of the message, okay, and ending of the message is indicated by means of a dot. So, a dot by itself ends the data, and then we have a quit command which is used to indicate end of session. So, end of session indicates that the complete SMTP session is being terminated. So, these are the 4 commands that we saw, but these are not the only commands that we have, we also have some other commands. So, let us take a look at them. Yeah, before that there is one interesting aspect that we need to look at. Now, we saw that a single dot on a line indicates end of a message. Suppose as part of your message you wanted to send a single dot on a line. So, how would you do that? You can see what the problem here would be. The problem is that if I were sending a single dot on a line by itself, it would be treated as end of message by the receiving side SMTP server. So, how do I indicate to the SMTP server that this is not end of the message, but it is actually part of the data? Okay, so that's one of the interesting things that come up here. So, a solution for this is also very simple. Solution that we use is the following. So, what you do now is you send a line which contains 2 dots, 2 periods, right. So, now your receiving MTA will remove one from the message and identify that the other is just part of the message. Okay. Now, this is very similar to using escape characters. We have seen this being used in many places in networks or network as well as in other programming languages as well. Whenever we have some special characters, we always try to have something called an escape character which identifies that this special character is not appearing as a special character, but it is appearing as an ordinary character. The same situation happens here as well. So, the dot here is not now a special character, but the dot now is a ordinary character in the sense that it just is to be treated as a dot itself, not as a special character as interpreted by the email by the SMTP protocol. So, we use 2 dots, right. So, this is the solution that we use for this very simple problem that crops up. Okay. So, coming to the other SMTP commands, we have a command called verify, VRFY, which stands for verify. Now, this is to confirm that a name is a valid recipient. So, when you want to verify that the person who you are sending the data to is a valid recipient, a verify command can be used by the client. Then you have another command called EXPN, which is used for expanding or expand an alias. For instance, this could be used for group email addresses. You may have a group email address, but a group email address you will have only a single address, but it has to be sent to many different clients. So, the expansion can be done by means of this EXPN command. Then there is something called a turn command, which is used to switch roles. So, now what happens in this case is the sender and receiver can switch roles. So, that is, we are talking about somebody acting as the client and somebody else acting as the server, right. So, when you switch roles, the other program, right, the other side starts acting as the client and this side starts acting as the server. So, you are switching roles between the sender and the receiver. So, this is used in certain unique situations. Then there is another command called SOML, which indicates send or mail. Okay. Now, this is a command which is provided for ease of access. That is, if the recipient is logged in, you display the message on the terminal, otherwise email, right. So, that is you are sending the message from a user, and if you find the other recipient to whom you are sending it is already logged in, the message that you are sending can be directly displayed on his terminal. If he is not logged in, it will go into the email box, it will go into the mailbox. So, this is called a send or mail. Send indicates you are sending it directly to that person, mail indicates that it will go into the email. So, it is called a send or mail option that you have. Sometimes it can so happen that the SMTP server may not implement some of these options. In that case, what would the SMTP server do? It will give you a response which says that it has not implemented that command. So, this is what would happen in this case. For instance, if you look at this situation here, where the SMTP server does not implement this particular SOML command, then it returns a response called 502, which indicates that command is not implemented, 5.5.1 command not implemented SOML. So, this is an indication to the client that this SOML command is not implemented by the server. So, this is how we handle these options as well. Okay. Now, other than SOML, we have something called SAML. Now, SOML was send or mail. Now, SAML is send and mail. This would mean that you are going to be sending the message as well as sending it to the mailbox, right. So, this is a send and mail option that you have. Then you also have a no-op, which basically is to send back a positive reply code. Then you have a reset, which is used to abort a current transaction. So, these are some of the other SMTP commands that we have. Now, what is very interesting about the SMTP protocol is that you can actually try out the SMTP interaction for yourself. Because the entire SMTP protocol is a plain text message or a plain ASCII message, you can just log in directly to an SMTP server, right. Log in the sense that you can telnet to an SMTP server and directly type in your SMTP commands and see the responses coming from the other side. So, we will just take you through a quick session of how that can be done. So, this is basically how you would do it. So, what you do is you first telnet into the server that you want to send and say telnet server name followed by the port number. Now, we said that SMTP runs at port number 25. So, you say telnet server name 25. Now, what will happen is in response to this you will get a reply which says 220 as the reply which comes from the server. The server will give you a response which says 220 and gives the name of the server. Now, you know that you are connected to the server. So, now what you do is you can enter all these commands in sequence. You give a hello, you will get a response, then you give a mail from, you will get a response, give a RCPT2, you get a response, data, follow it with whatever data you want, end it with a dot and then give a quit command. So, the moment you give all these commands, you will find that you would have actually successfully implemented a complete SMTP interaction with the server. Okay. So, you can also see that this entire thing now lets you send email without actually using an email client or a reader. You are not actually used an email client, you are directly acting as the user agent and directly sending the mail to the not even as acting as the user agent, you are directly sending the mail to the server. So, we will just take a look at what this a typical session like this would look like. Okay. So, see what happens here. Say for instance, telnet startrek.com 25 is the message being sent. So, the response that would have come would be something like this 220 Star Trek, that is the name of the server, and that is followed by more information about which is the mail program on the other side, okay, some version number, date, time and so on. Okay. Then the user now specifies hello www.ku.ac.th identifying himself. So, now the Star Trek server says 250 Star Trek hello and greets the client. Then you say mail from Kirk at ku.ac.th indicating that you are the user who is sending mail. So, then he says 250 sender ok. So, now you say RCPT2 Scotty at startrek.com, this is the recipient's message mail address you are specifying. So, it again gives you back a 250 recipient ok, this is the message you would get. Then you would say data, and the moment you say data it would follow up with 354 Star Trek send data, now terminate with dot. Now, this can be now followed with whatever data you are sending. You say subject colon beam me up Scotty, there is no intelligence whatever, you just specify whatever data you want and you end it with a dot. So, this dot indicates that you have terminated your message. So, your Star Trek server now responds with 250 Star Trek message accepted for delivery. So this completes your session. Of course, now you would give a quit there, and the quit would indicate that you have totally terminated your SMTP session. Okay, this is something that you can directly do to see how the SMTP protocol works. Okay. Other things that you could do with the SMTP session are what we will look at now. You can try to relay mail to someone on another system. Okay. So for instance, you say mail from kirk@startrek.com. So he says sender okay, and then you say receipt to jim@yahoo.com. Now, if relaying is permitted, this would go through. Otherwise, it would say 550 relaying denied to jim@yahoo.com, which means that you cannot do this relaying. So these are some things that you could try out to see how the protocol actually works. Okay. Further things that you could do are sending to multiple recipients. So this is how you would do this. So you say mail from, you specify who is sending the mail, you get a response for that. Then you say receipt to need not be just one single statement, but you could have multiple receipt to. So you have one receipt to where you specify this particular sender's name, so it accepts that recipient. Then you say recipient to, you send another person's name, so it accepts that as well. So you could do this, you could send to multiple recipients. These are also things that you could very easily try out. Okay. Other mail transfer agent services are things like mailing list expansion. Now I just told you that you could have groups and you could expand the group email ID to correspond to the mail IDs of all the people who belong to this group. So when you say to faculty, for instance, it would expand it automatically to the different people who are there on that particular list. All these can be done with the help of the MTA or the mail transfer agent. Yet another service which is normally provided by many mail transfer agents is mail filtering. That is, you would blacklist using a database or a local file as to who are the people who you would not want to receive data from. So that is another filter that can normally be implemented on any MTS, on any mail transfer agent. Okay. So the format of a mail message looks like this typically. We have just seen most of what we are, most of what is given over here. So you see that you have a header. Now what is a header? You can see that all these lines that we talked about now, to, from, subject, all these things form the header. You can see that all these are part of the SMTP protocol as well. This is what forms the header of this particular mail message. But remember that this is different from the SMTP command. So this is actually part of the message that is sent, right? This is different from the command that is sent. So to, from, subject, and then you will have a body where the message actually where the message is given. But remember that you are only allowed to send ASCII characters using the email message. So typically the way you have it is you will have a header, then there is a blank line followed by the body of the message. I am sure all of you have seen this mail messages, you are familiar with this. So a quick comparison with the HTTP protocol before we end our discussion on SMTP. HTTP is referred to as a pull protocol, whereas SMTP is referred to as a push protocol. Push in the sense that you are pushing data, right? In HTTP we go and pull it from the server, whereas SMTP we are pushing the mail message to a server. Both have ASCII command response interaction and status codes. So which is why we can see that for both HTTP and SMTP we can telnet into the servers and do the and give the commands and see what the response look like. A difference between HTTP and one other difference between HTTP and SMTP would be that in HTTP each object is encapsulated in its own response message, but we will see that in SMTP if you want to send multiple objects they would actually be sent in multi-part messages. We will be looking at some details of this in another session. Okay. So this is a quick comparison with HTTP protocol. So to summarize, what we have looked at today are the following. We have looked at basically how electronic mail is done using the SMTP protocol. We saw the interaction that takes place between the user agent and the mail server using the SMTP protocol. We have noted that it is a plain text data transfer that takes place, and we also looked at the format that is used for the data exchange. A set of questions to review the material. Question number 1. SMTP is a client server application, true or false? Question number 2. Give examples of commonly used mail reader programs. Question number 3. What are the commonly used SMTP commands? Question number 4. How is the SMTP message terminated? Question number 5. Is SMTP a push protocol or a pull protocol? That is all for you on SMTP, the first part. Thank you.